Welcome back to American Popular Music, continuing on with the 60s blues and psychedelia. American Popular Music from the 60s, mostly out of California again. Actually, we're venturing over to Britain a little bit today. But first, The Doors from the LA scene. We're venturing out of San Francisco. The Doors, for a while, the most popular band in America. Okay, pictured here, Jim Morrison from the right, Ray Manzarek on keyboards, aka organ, next to him, then Robbie Krieger on guitar, John Densmore on drums. They had a unique sound, partially because they didn't have a bass player. Notice I didn't say bass. So what happened is Ray Manzarek would play. He played two organs. He would play regular organ with his right hand, and then like a little bass keyboard thing with his left hand to fill in the bass line. So the bass lines are end up being really like sort of loopy and like an ostinato is the technical term for it. But they just kind of like it's really vampy because he's trying to do two things at once. And so he ends up playing pretty simple bass lines. Not that regular bass players don't do that either, but there's just less. It's just very driving and kind of minimalistic in a way. And also, and he's a classically trained keyboardist, piano player. And Robbie Krieger, he's kind of influenced by flamenco, which is a Spanish style of guitar playing. He doesn't use distortion or anything, and he's very sort of melodic and arpeggios. Not a lot of like tight strumming or power chords or anything. He's very nimble. He moves around quite a bit. And then John Densmore is actually a jazz drummer. He didn't play a lot of rock and roll before joining the Doors. The band name comes from Aldous Huxley's book, Doors of Perception, about his mescaline trip. And they formed in LA in 1966 when Jim Morrison ran into Ray Manzarek at the beach and read him some poetry. Actually, Jim hadn't ever sung before, but Ray, he liked Jim's poetry, you know, recognized that Jim is very attractive. He's sort of, he's very, so he'd be a good front man. And turns out he has a great baritone voice too. So Ray hired him to come hang out with his band, and it worked out. And although the rest of the band didn't like um, Jim Morrison, so they quit. So that's when they hired John Densmore and Robbie Krieger. They were actually the last additions to the band. Their first album comes out in 1967 after working their way up the LA club circuit and getting a house band gig at Whiskey A Go Go. They get signed after an executive hears them at Whiskey A Go Go. And they have two hits from that first album, Light My Fire and Break On Through. So I'm going to let you watch a little bit of their live performances are pretty unique, especially for the time. So we're going to watch a little bit of Light My Fire, if it will let me. I clicked. Here we go.
That I would be a liar if I were to say to you
That's the little bass
girl,
keyboard.
we couldn't get much higher. Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire. Time to hesitate is through. No time to wallow in the mire. Try now, we can only lose, and our love become a funeral pyre. Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire.
Extended keyboard solo here. So he's playing the bass line and improvising with his right hand. They certainly weren't a jam band, but they did have a few extended songs and would stretch out a little bit on live performance sometimes. Yeah. That song was famous on the Ed Sullivan Show. Um, he famously was asked not the one of the rhymes is higher to get higher, like she gets high, she gets high. Um, but about drugs, and they are asked not to say it, and he looks right in the camera and sings it, and they got in a lot of trouble for that. Here's "Break On Through." It's a bossa nova, which is interesting. It's not really a rock beat. Of course, you got that ostinato bass line, like most Doors songs.
Destroys a night, night divides a day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side, yeah. We chased our pleasures here, dug our treasures there. But can you still recall the time we cried? Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side.
Here's the drug reference that was cut. Okay, you can hear the kind of intensity of the vocals. Jim Morrison is known for just that kind of frenzied style. The end. Okay, all these albums are from songs are from their first album, but they kind of lay the blueprint for all their subsequent albums. A lot of their, I think, what do they have? 6 albums. I think 5 out of the 6 of them end with like an extended, like a longer form. I wouldn't call it like a jam, but like a more of like an epic, like a grander piece, sort of like a little mini opera by the Who or something. And this just kind of gives you a like a larger platform for Jim Morrison's poetry. Um, the lyrics were so important to this band. So we're gonna listen to a little bit of the end as well. Okay, yeah. So actually, no, I'm gonna play you "Riders on the Storm," which kind of fits the same mold, but it's from their last album, "L.A. Woman." "Riders on the Storm," 1971, from "L.A. Woman." Fits that same formula as the end.
Riders on the storm, riders on the storm. Into this house we're born, into this world we're thrown. Like a dog without a bone, an actor out alone. Riders on the storm, there's a killer on the road. His brain is squirming like a toad. Take a long holiday, let your children play. If you give this man a ride, sweet family will die. Killer on the road, yeah.
All right, this is actually sort of a blues in a sense, a variation of the blues. "Riders on the Storm." Just noticed that. A little bit about Jim Morrison. Musically, maybe not the most important part of the band, but spiritually, lyrically, he's what made the band happen. Arguably the best psychedelic poet ever. While he was alive, he published 2 two books of his poems, and posthumously there were the Doors put out a record of him. They set several of his poems to music, so like there was recordings of him reading his poetry, and they set that to music. It's actually quite effective. I like it quite a bit. So yeah, so if you like his poetry, if you like the Doors, check that out too. It's really nice. He was kind of a drunk. He was kind of erratic. They would have great shows and then they would have terrible shows. He would be all over the place. Very unreliable. He is a certified hottie though. He's a hunky dude. Okay. At a show in Miami, he supposedly exposed himself on stage and simulated masturbation. There's no evidence of it. There were no witnesses came forward. There's no photographs or anything. So, but just supposedly it happened. The police heard it happen, so it was like a rumor, and they arrested him for it. But mostly he was just erratic, and they probably wanted to just arrest him. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him either. Sadly, though, he he had a very tumultuous life. He moved to Paris to try to like get a break from that and try to like chill out, and he died in 1971, probably from an overdose. There's a lot of rumors around his death because there was no autopsy or anything. Some people think he's still alive, or it was a murder or something, but he probably just OD'd. Unfortunately, sad. Rest in peace. So there's many deaths around this time. We already talked about Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison. We have one more to cover today. Okay, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. He's dead too, but not just because he had cancer, so it's not as tragic. He had a long and fruitful career. Frank Zappa. He could do everything. He's a guitar virtuoso. People forget that because he was so good at everything else too. He could sing. He composed. He's a musical anarchist. I really like that term. He could play everything. He was a lyric. I mean, he wrote the lyrics to his songs too. I'll be honest. Most of his lyrics are like fairly juvenile, but like, that was his aesthetic, and he was good at it. So I don't know. Is he a bad lyricist? It's just maybe not like. I mean, it was juvenile on purpose to kind of thumb his nose at people who took themselves too seriously. So I don't know. I mean, he was successful in achieving what he wanted to with his lyrics. So maybe he was good, but it just wasn't. I wouldn't call it like poetry or anything. A lot of juvenile humor. He put out his first album in 1966. Album called Freak Out. It was pretty revolutionary. It was a double album, which was unheard of at the time. Huge variety of music, right? There's like experimental stuff. There's minimalist stuff. There's blues. There's rock. The whole thing it's pretty wild. It's a wild ride. The whole thing's in a sense a manifesto to individuality and personal freedom. He's very much about being yourself, being creative, and being being a creative person and following your own rules. This is Who Are the Brain Police from that album. It's kind of collage like. What I mean by that is like these different sections, like it's sort of like a visual collage, right? You kind of like these disparate sections that kind of come together to form a bigger piece of music, but they kind of like sometimes the transitions are jarring and unpredictable. You can hear a lot of effects, right? It's not just instruments. There's a lot of studio effects. He spent a lot of time learning how to use the studio as an instrument. So you're going to hear a lot of that too. Here's Who Are the Brain Police.
All melted, and so is the chrome. Who are the brain police? What will you do when the lady
I'll end it there. See what I mean? It's just like, it's like wacky. It's just wacky, man. It's super fun though. Love it. Okay, Hot Rats. I mean, as you saw in the notes, he recorded over 60 albums. So I you can like barely skim the surface here of what he's done. But some of the highlights continued. Hot Rats. Again, a really maybe not super poetic title, but you know, it's gross. And that's what he's going for. Success. Okay, considered one of the first jazz fusion albums. Most people think of like Miles Davis with jazz fusion. Yeah, for sure. Miles Davis also released a jazz fusion album in 1969 called Bitches Brew. But you know, this is happening at the same time, coming from the other direction. Frank is coming from Zappa's coming from rock going into jazz. Miles is coming from jazz going into rock. So it sounds different, but they're both a fusion of the two. We're gonna listen to Peaches in Regalia. It's stream of consciousness. What I mean by that is like there's not like a clear like repeating structure to it. It's just kind of like one thing leads to the next and it just like continually changes. Again, it's sort of collage like. And now you can hear a lot more like thick jazz harmonies, fewer studio effects, but more lush, dissonant chords. So this is what I mean by stream of consciousness. It's just like a new idea after a new idea. We haven't returned to any of the previous themes. It's like a new instruments, new melodies. Another new melody. Entirely new melody. This is somewhat of like a chorus. This is like the main theme. Again, so this whole thing is just stream of consciousness. It's great. Okay, 1973, Zappa gets pushed off a stage by some crazy person. He cracks his skull. Gets really banged up, crushes his larynx, and it changes his voice. Actually, it makes his voice lower, but he can still sing after he recovers, and it kind of becomes a thing, right? His low voice becomes like a iconic somewhat. So you're gonna hear it featured in this song, "Don't Eat Yellow Snow." You're gonna hear his juvenile humor here in "Don't Eat Yellow Snow."
Dreamed I was an Eskimo. Frozen wind began to blow. Under my boots and around my toe. Frost that bit the ground below. 100 degrees below zero. And my mama cried. And my mama cried. Don't be a naughty Eskimo. Save your money, don't go to the show. Well, I turned around and I said, ho, ho, ho. Well, I turned around and I said, ho, ho, ho. Well, I turned around and I said, ho, ho. And the northern lights commenced to glow. And she said, with a tear in her eye, watch out where the huskies go, and don't you eat that yellow snow. Watch out where the huskies go, and don't you eat that yellow snow.
There you go. So, yellow snow, pee in snow, dog pee. Really creative. Okay, cool. But yeah, I mean, it's like musically, it's so interesting though. It's like, that's where. And some people, I mean, that's really funny to people too. I don't know. Not my sense of humor, but I do like the music. Okay, yeah. What else? Jazz from Hell, Perfect Stranger. He innovated kind of synthesizers and computer music. Do I have an answer here? Here's Jazz from Hell. At this point, he stopped working with the band and started recording with himself and a computer in a studio, home studio. I think you get the idea. That one is like very aptly titled. I think Jazz from Hell is like pretty accurate. Just a little teeny bit of Pedro's Dowry from his orchestra writing. I mean, this is just to show you what this guy can do. I mean, he can play everything. He can sing. He wrote 60 albums. He wrote for full orchestra. He did everything with computer music. One of the most prolific and influential musicians of the 20th century. Not just in popular music, not just rock and roll. Influenced every jazz musician and classical musician. Okay, let's move on now to Eric Clapton and Cream. Eric Clapton, of course, one of the great rock and blues guitarists ever. As you know, he played in the Yardbirds before he formed Cream. 1966, he formed it with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker. In this picture here, Ginger Baker, as you would guess, is the ginger. In the top left, he's the drummer. That's Eric Clapton in the top right, and then Jack Bruce, the bassist, in the bottom. They didn't get along. I mean, I think Eric liked both of them. He invited them to the band, but Bruce and Baker did not get along. Okay. They got really popular for their loud, extended blues jams, right? Because Eric Clapton he was a really technically proficient guitarist, also just very melodic. The first album didn't chart, nevertheless, and it wasn't until their second album, Disraeli Gears, in 1968, that they really reached a wide audience. Sunshine of Your Love was a huge hit. It's a blues. It's got call and response, extended blues guitar solo, and doo-wop vocals. I mean, this is really kind of a throwback music if you think about it. It's just got a little more distortion on it, basically. It's not really different than 1950s rock and roll. It's for the riff.
It's getting near dawn when light nights close the tired eyes. I'll soon be with you, my love. Give you my dawn surprise. I'll be with you, darling, soon. I'll be with you when the stars start falling.
By the way, Eric Clapton is singing as well. He's the guitar and singer.
I've been waiting so long to be where I'm going, in the sunshine of your love. I'm with you, my love. The light shining through on you. Yes, I'm with you, my love. It's the morning and just we two. I'll stay with you, darling, now. I'll stay with you till my seas are dried up. I've been waiting so long to be where I'm going, in the sunshine of your love.
Here comes the solo. Yeah. Excellent, excellent, excellent. He went solo in 1968. Bruce and Baker couldn't get along any longer. So the band broke up very shortly after that. They had like one more album that it had a hit with in the White Room, but they broke up. Ginger Baker, if you're ever curious, he's a really interesting person. His story is he's bonkers. There's stories about him like driving through the Sahara in the middle of the night to cross the border illegally to go record with like Fela Kuti and stuff. It's just like the guy's look him up. He's a really crazy character, Ginger Baker. No wonder Jack Bruce is a little more straight laced. That's why I think they just didn't get along. He was kind of on again, off again. Like he back to Eric Clapton here. He had a drug problem, heroin, alcohol. He I don't think he didn't handle the sudden stardom very well. I think it was just like a lot of pressure. So he kind of on and off again. He still plays again now and then, occasionally. He's still alive. Layla and Assorted Live Songs was his next really important album from 1970. It was recorded under a pseudonym, Derek and the Dominoes, not under Eric Clapton or anything else. The song Layla was the biggest hit. You probably know this song. It's actually about his unrequited love for Patty Harrison, George Harrison's wife. It's an amazing guitar solo. It's the big thing. And it's a duo with Duane Allman from the Allman Brothers. You can hear some nice modulation. We're going to change keys going into the chorus. It's a great song. Layla. Oh, that was, sorry. That was just a little bit of White Room from their third album.
In a white room with black curtains near the station. Black no strings.
All right, you get the idea. Here's Layla. It's a great song to bite your lower lip to.
What'll you do when you get lonely? Nobody's waiting by your side. You've been running, hiding much too long. You know it's just your foolish stride. You got me on my knees. I beg you, darling, please. Darling, won't you hear my tried to give you consolation when your old man let you down. Like a fool, I fell in love with you. Turn the whole world upside down.
Okay, unfortunately for time, we're not gonna get to the sick guitar solo, but yeah. Do it on your own time. Enjoy it. Layla, amazing. Amazing song. Okay. One of my favorite musicians of all time, Jimi Hendrix. Love him. One of the greatest technicians on the guitar. One of the most creative people to ever make music. So good. So good. Everything he touched. In terms of guitar, what did he do? I mean, he's probably one of the greatest of all time. Few people compare. Maybe John McLaughlin, maybe Jimmy Page. I could list some jazz guitarists that you probably haven't heard of either. But man, in terms of rock and roll and the blues, there's not many anywhere close to Jimmy. He expanded the sonic possibility of guitars. He kind of, not just like his technique, which was unreal, but like his use of feedback, his pedals, the wah-wah pedals, the distortion pedals, whammy bar. He kind of pioneered all that stuff. That is like very commonplace now. You can't play electric guitar without learning those techniques that he started. He also sang and wrote songs. His music was always rooted in the blues, though. He's very much a blues guitarist at the heart of it. He learned guitar by listening to his dad's jazz and blues records. Speaking of which, he grew up in Seattle. He's left-handed, and he would just like, they didn't really make a lot of left-handed guitars back then. So you either just like learned on your non-dominant hand, or you just flipped it over, and he just flipped it over and restrung it. So that's why his guitar looks so funny in all his pictures, because the guitar is literally just upside down, basically. And I think it's part of the reason he had a unique sound. I think the pickups were like backwards then too. He joined the army in 1959. He gets out a few years later. Unclear why. He says he broke an ankle. At the time, they heard he just kind of like pretended to be homosexual in order to get out of the military, because that was like not allowed at that time. Let's see. He goes to Nashville, plays in the chitlin circuit for a while. He plays with people like Little Richard. He gets a few gigs, but he keeps getting kicked out because he keeps ad-libbing and shredding. And he does not just... You're supposed to play the guitar, the chords, right? Maybe take a solo now and then, but he just keeps ad-libbing too much for people. He's too much of a free spirit. So he's getting fired. He actually really idolizes Bob Dylan. So he moves back up to New York. So he kind of wants to go to Greenwich Village because that's where the folk music scene is. He starts taking LSD around this time, mid-60s. He kind of became a hit locally in Greenwich Village, that area, Harlem, New York City. But it's like not really going anywhere. He's just kind of playing local cafes and clubs and stuff. And people don't really know what to make with him. He's like too wild, too like, they don't know what to do. So Chaz Chandler from the Animals tells him, dude, just go to England. I'll help you out. Let me be your manager. And we'll make it happen. So he does. He just takes this guy's advice and he moves to London for a little bit, and he forms the Experience, the Jimi Hendrix Experience, with Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding. So their first album comes out in 1967. It's got a huge variety of styles. Like you can hear it, just like he can play anything, right? He's got jazz jams like Third Stone from the Sun. There's electric folk like The Wind Cries Mary. It's a lot like Blonde on Blonde, the Bob Dylan album. It's very much a folk song. There's some blues tunes on there. Red House. It's just a straight up, just like it's an old blues, like a Sun House record or something. Red House. And of course, there's hard rock. Purple Haze, maybe it's the most famous song from that. And then there's just straight up psychedelia, just modeled after kind of the Beatles, sort of psychedelic stuff of the same period. Just trippy music. Again, he innovates all that stuff. There's, in addition to his wild guitar technique, he's got a lot of studio effects in there too. He's figuring out how to use tape and spoken word and stuff. It's really unique album. Incredibly innovative masterwork. What was I gonna say? Forgot something. Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, and he sings on the album and does the spoken word, but he actually didn't really want to sing. He's like, I'm just a guitar player, right? But Chandler and and his producers and stuff encouraged him to sing because they thought it would be more marketable. So you'll see like his weakest point, and maybe like the reason I don't think we like listen to him as much as he deserves, I think is like he's not a great singer. He's okay, but he doesn't have a great voice, and he knew that. But I think I don't know. So I'm not saying they were wrong to ask him to sing. He's fine, but it could be, if anything, that's the weakest spot. This is Purple Haze. And yes, this is a drug reference. Purple Haze is either, I think it's LSD strain. Okay, let me clarify that right now. Everyone thinks he's saying kiss this guy, which would be fine if he was, but he's saying kiss the sky. Sky. Here's some of the spoken word in the background now, under this guitar solo. Enjoy the rest of that on your own. Let's take a look at a couple of videos because his live performance is so interesting. So he's really famous for this Monterey Pop Festival showing where he ends up, he's playing the Trog's Wild Thing, and then he ends up lighting his guitar fire. This is what... he's a guy that can... play upside down behind his back while he drinks himself. This is 7 minutes, so I'm going to fast forward a bit. So this is I'm going to fast forward a bit to save time, but this is the show that put him on the map. He was getting some traction in the UK. This pop festival in 1967 is what made him famous in the States. She was kind of like acting out somewhat of a trance or a ceremony and lighting his guitar on fire while it's still playing. He just poured kerosene on it and lit it up, and now he's gonna smash it. Not very successfully. You get the idea, but we are gonna listen to a little bit more of the Star Spangled Banner. Okay. So let me just say a few things about this first. So this is the most famous performance of the Star Spangled Banner ever, 1969 Woodstock. So he was supposed to be like a closer on Sunday night at the festival, but everything was just running late, organized by a bunch of hippies. So he doesn't really go on until like dawn on Monday morning because everything's so far behind. So he wasn't planning on playing the Star Spangled Banner, but it's the first show of the day, and they had been playing the anthem, the first show of the day. So they didn't practice this. So this is all improvised, and it is a protest against the Vietnam War. We talked about that in the beginning. A lot of this music has been political or social commentary. This is directly about the Vietnam War. If you say the words of the Star Spangled Banner in your head as you listen, "Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light," blah, 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 you will hear him play that melody and then comment on it. In particular, listen to after the words, and and the rocket's red glare. You're going to hear him make rocket sounds, basically, and comment on it. And the bombs bursting in air. And what he's doing is making those sounds and tying it into the Vietnam War, saying, it's not a proud, the lyrics of the national anthem are supposed to be, a point of pride about winning the 1812 overture. But this is now, he's turning it on its head and, saying this is a point of shame that we're bringing violence upon the Vietnamese people. Incredibly incredible piece, completely improvised. And there's just the thing about Jimi Hendrix is very few people. There's zero distance between his imagination and his execution, right? For most musicians, there's somewhat of a difficulty in translating what you're hearing in your head and what you can play in your instrument. Or at least some delay. But him, it's just like instant. Like you can hear what's going on in his mind, what he's hearing at the same time, because he's so proficient and so creative. Here he quotes taps, the bugle call that is played at military funerals. There we go. And there we have it. Unbelievable. Okay. It's not right that I make you listen to a whole song, but that's just unbelievable. Okay, so his next couple albums, Access, Bold and Love, and Electric Ladyland, were very well received. We're going to listen to Voodoo Child, Slight Return. This is where he like really, I mean, he used it before, but now he's like really mastering the wah-wah pedal. It becomes kind of a standard effect for guitar players ever since. Wait, do I have it? Here we go. All right. Incredible solo. Check it out. All Along the Watchtower became the definitive version of this Dylan song. It's a Bob Dylan cover. But Bob Dylan actually plays it the same way Jimi Hendrix does. After Jimmy recorded it, Dylan was like, that's better. And then Jimi Hendrix dies, and so Dylan plays it the same way as Jimmy, as a tribute to him.
There must be some kind of way out of here.
Say the joker to the thief. There's too much confusion. I can't get no relief. Businessman there, drink my wine. Plowman, dig my earth. None will ever own the mine. Nobody of it is worth. Hey.
Obviously, when Bob Dylan does it, he doesn't have shredding guitar solos. So after Woodstock happened, Hendrix broke up with The Experience and formed a new band called the Band of Gypsies. They were more racially diverse, more musically diverse. Yeah. Then he doesn't have to sing anymore, right? He kind of like is like he's famous now. He doesn't have to do that, and he lets the bassist Billy.
Funny Mom's gonna do this thing he
Here it
wrote
is.
called Dim Changes.
Here's an example.
Well, my mind is going through them changes. I feel just like committing a crime. Every time you see me going somewhere, I feel like I'm going out of my mind, yeah. Oh, my baby, she left me the other day, and we were having
You get the idea. Okay, so I'll leave it there for time. But check it out. I put some other Hendrix tracks on there, including his like blues playing, just his straight blues, Catfish blues. One of my favorite tracks of all time. It's just when he doesn't have to think about songwriting or anything, he just shredding on a blues is amazing. Okay, he builds famous Electric Ladyland Studios in 1969 to 19. It should be 70. I thought the 9 was a 0. It looks like a 0. But he barely gets to record in it because he overdoses on sleeping pills and alcohol in 1970. So again, we've had a string of unfortunate deaths in the late 60s, early 70s. Janis Joplin, Brian Jones, who's at the top of this? Oh yeah, Jim Morrison, of course, Jimi Hendrix. Yeah, and there's more to come. So it's been a tragic era for music, for the country as a whole. But the music lives with us today. So rest in peace, Jimmy. And I'll see you next time in America.